Ready?
I'm sure.
Hello, everyone. My name is Heather Barta. I am the coordinator of Province 5. We are here on Monday, September 12th at the Province 4 and 5 Creation Care Environmental Care Network meeting. I will hand you over to Jerry, who is the Province 4 Environmental Network coordinator.
Coordinator for this. Yes, thank you. This is the first of our new meeting time. We have been doing these monthly meetings for a long time, but we've just changed our time slot to try to accommodate some folks better. And for today, in the September meeting, we have Pam Harris with us, and she was at General Convention this summer. And our conversation for the day is, well, what happened there in terms of creation care, and what was passed, and so on, and what does it mean, and what can we do with it, if anything. So Pam, thank you for being willing, for one, to put yourself out going to convention, but then also joining us and sharing with us and leading us in this conversation. So Pam, it's all yours.
Okie doke. Just to give you a little view of who I am and where I stand. I am a cradle Episcopalian, a member of a rare breed that's rapidly disappearing. I was born in Washington, D.C., lived briefly in Maryland, and then after my dad died, my mom moved us out to California, and I spent 20 years there in various places. And then I followed my husband to Northern Indiana when he took a job with the practice here. I have a baccalaureate degree in essentially ecology from the University of California. And I have all but my dissertation towards a PhD in comparative pharmacology and toxicology. I have been involved in environmental issues, I think, almost the entirety of my life. My mother used to go crazy because I would disappear into the woods and she would be scared to death that I would get lost, but I have reasonably good directional sense, so I never did. But I was ecstatic to be assigned to the Legislative Committee on Care of Creation and Environmental Stewardship this time at General Convention, because it was actually only the second time I've served on a legislative committee that fell into my area of expertise. And so I think it would probably be easiest if you all have had access to the resolutions. If you have questions, I'll try to answer them.
Well, with that, let's survey then a little bit first. I dropped my video because I too am out here where there is no decent internet access. When there gets to be this many screens up, it just starts to falter. And Heather, I may end up asking you to share screens instead, but we'll see how this goes. But so, Pam, so let's tell us, folks, how many have actually looked at these resolutions and know anything at all about them, or are we starting from ground zero? How many have had conversations since July? How many have done any work in any committees since July with that which was passed at General Convention this year? Anyone? Raise your hands. I guess let's do it this way. Raise your hand if you have had some background in this. Leela, I see some. Neria, Catherine, some. The rest of you, the answer would be no. So I guess what I'm thinking maybe is, Pam, that we review. I think there's about 8 of them, right? Do you have a list, the short list?
I have a list. 1, 2, 3, 4. There are 5 of them.
Is there an easy link we can go to while we're online here?
Yep, I will share a screen, and with each one of these, I will pull it up.
Perfect,
So,
thank you.
Yep, so you just tell me what number that is, and I'll pull it up. So what's the first one you want to look at?
Well, the first on the list is A020.
Commit to the pressing work of accessing global climate change and environmental justice.
No.
That's 088. I need 020.
Support decade of action to achieve sustainable development goals.
Yep. That one's pretty straightforward. It's the sustainable development goals are kind of a replacement for the old set of goals, and forgive me, the name just went out of my head.
The Millennium Development Goals.
The Millennium Development Goals. Thank you very much. And it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, what I see is it's calling on parishes, dioceses, and jurisdictions to educate themselves and develop their own educational resources.
Right.
And so it's a good question if you were passing resolutions in your own diocese about whether you would ask the diocese to do such a thing.
Yeah, well, the commission that I belong to and that our diocese here is trying to come up with ways of doing that. We have our annual convention coming up, and we've been talking about whether we should have a booth but that depends entirely on how the convention's organized. We are going to be enjoying a visit from the presiding bishop.
Yeah, and self-audits. It would be an interesting work to ask folks how to do that, or to figure out how it's possible to even do that, or share stories with
Right.
somebody.
Sharing stories should be
story
easy.
sharing, yeah.
But the self-audits, I'm not sure exactly what they are wanting us to do. Unless they want us just to look and see what our impact on the environment has been over the years.
Okay. Others? What's another one?
AO8.
Wait, can we, before we move on, can we ask, like, have other people considered these things yet? I know some of you haven't seen it, but what's going on where you are that would address this resolution? Or ideas of what we should do? Like, what are some actions? Like, it sounded like there were a couple action possibilities.
I'm not sure exactly what the sustainable development goals are. I mean, I've heard of them and I probably looked at them, but I don't remember them.
I put a link in the chat. I am doing some notes too, and so they'll be in the notes, but there's a link in the chat that opens up the goals so you can see them.
Here we go.
Keep saving the chat, I'll learn, because it doesn't add on.
Where are the opportunities to tell stories?
Right, that's interesting to me. That is something a community or a diocese or a committee could do. Is to do some reporting, basically. To quiz parishes or people or ministries and say, do you have any stories to tell about that, and then compile them on a website or compile them in an event or something like that.
I'd like to share that, although we haven't done anything about the environment as far as I know, our parish was active in another resolution, another area. And I think you just sometimes need to bring issues to people's attention. The work of the local parish is often so directed at local issues. And when you bring things to the vestry and then people start getting interested, and if you're just selective and not do too much, it really isn't that difficult to get them into something.
Yeah, and I would argue that storytelling is a better entry point than audits.
Oh, yeah.
Numbers just don't seem to inspire,
Uh-huh.
but stories do. And so, if one, you know, just in this 1, 2, 3, and 4, educational resources, auditing, and stories, number 4 probably might be the best entry.
I agree with that.
Okay. Any more conversation about that?
The next one is A087.
This is real easy to get the resolutions. That's the.
Net carbon
That's
neutrality.
carbon neutrality. This one essentially wants all dioceses, parishes, and institutions within the church, as you can read, to commit to a goal of reducing our emissions from staff travel, energy production, and energy efficient buildings and all of that. And they do list a number of a budget allocation of $70,000 a year for the implementation of the resolution, and to hire an offset specialist and supply them with 15, that include 15,000 to cover wages and benefits for a part-time specialist, and 10,000 for the implementation and promotion of the program. Now, I don't know about you all, but those seem to me to be highly unrealistic financial amounts. Because I can't see a part-time offset specialist working for 15,000 unless they only work a couple of hours a week. I just don't think that that's realistic.
No, we just did a grant application for the care of creation thing, and that was what we estimated we would spend for a student assistant.
Right.
Right.
But a professional, I just don't see them unless they're working for very short periods of time or are terribly into doing this from the goodness of their heart, so to speak. But essentially, this is probably the most generalized of all of the resolutions. And it includes a whole bunch of stuff that.
May I raise a point here? I mean, that's $15,000 to cover wages and benefits for a part-time offset specialist. I mean, this is for the Episcopal Church organization.
Right.
You know, it goes down below to encourage parishes, dioceses, schools, et cetera. But I think it's really inspiring, actually, that the church organization itself is setting out to do this.
Well,
I mean, am I interpreting this wrong?
No, I think that's right. This is from the top down. So they're talking about 815. Nuria, I see your hand.
I have this look on my face because the budget process at the church-wide level has changed.
yes, it has.
And the way that resolutions worked under the past process, which is what we just utilized at this past general convention. So I should, in the spirit of transparency, I'm a deputy from Western Michigan to general convention. So a resolution, if it has a budget allocation, will go to program budget and finance, which is the budget making committee of general convention. But that doesn't mean that the allocation that is listed in the resolution is part of the final budget.
That's right.
So
It's recommended,
it's a recommended amount.
Recommendation.
encouraged.
Yep. So these are,
Right.
these staff positions have not been added. And
No.
I don't anticipate that they are going to be added in the current budget cycle, even
No,
though.
I agree with you.
Resolution.
I agree with you. I'm a member of the companion diocese committee of our diocese, and we've been pulling our hair out trying to get things added. There were a number of resolutions that came. Well, they were on the they were voted on in Salt Lake City and again in Austin that have been totally unfunded because the budget had already been set. So that's one of the reasons why I think this is, it's pie in the sky when you talk about dollars.
Yeah.
In addition to the fact that I don't think that that's enough money to cover what the actual costs are going to be.
Yeah, it's about 5 hours a week of work.
Mhm.
Right.
Neri, I'm curious for you to comment on the Faithlands impulse here in this resolution. Did you see that, and what have you given that thought since that came through, or were you around for that to come through? The General Convention requests that bishops begin to build networks of landowner and creation trustees, develop portions of their land for reforestation, prairie restoration, wetlands, and coastline preservation, and regenerative agriculture.
Yeah, I'm thrilled that this is is in this resolution, and it carries forward work that was also passed by General Convention in 2015.
Right.
I believe Bishop Kathleen Bascom of Kansas was a part of this. Pam, you would know, because I wasn't on this legislative committee, but I believe she was, and you were.
Mhm.
And she's doing this in her diocese, where every time she goes on a visitation, she asks for the congregation, any major landowners, to meet with her and talks with them about the potential for land use and the way land is held to be a factor for carbon adaptation and mitigation, climate adaptation and mitigation, as well as spiritual benefit to us as disciples of Jesus, who understand that in him all things are made one and made new. So with that, I feel like we have a long distance to travel. This is work that I've been working on since, I don't know, 2017. I still feel like I have a long distance to travel, and like this needs all of us. Jerry, I don't know what else if that's what you wanted me to say, but if you have any more specific questions, I'd be happy to try them.
Well, this is one of them that we are actually talking about in the Diocese of Kentucky, proposing a local resolution to the diocese that says the bishop has been asked to do this. We would like to ask the bishop to do this. And so, because it says, right, bishops of every diocese. And so we want to say, all right, Bishop of the Diocese of Kentucky, can we pass a resolution that says the Diocese of Kentucky will begin to build a network, and it will report back to convention next year on its progress. And so it's very specific, right? You can say, okay, we have a list of however many churches there are in this diocese. Every one of them can have some kind of notation about its land use and potential intentions, and so on and so forth. So what do you think?
I mean, I have things I think, but I also want to defer to Elliot Bush, who had his hand up before I did.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that this is the Diocese of Southern Ohio has been granting $10,000 grants to any church in the diocese that they can use to improve their and to lower their use of energy and I know that at St. Stephen's we got it, and we've actually been very successful over the last 5 years of lowering the amount of energy that we use. But this was just implemented further. But from what I gathered, and if Catherine were here, she could say it better. I think they had trouble giving away the money because they kept sending emails saying, please apply for this, please apply for this. So I have a hunch that they did not get a whole lot of applications. But still, at the same time, the DSO has a really strong standing committee for environmentalism and environmental justice that is working very hard on trying to encourage churches to do these things.
That's really interesting to me in Western Michigan, where we have a few grant making programs that don't, that are more broad. I had not thought about trying to encourage some of those grant making programs to go in the direction of also supporting net carbon, because I was down one road in my brain. So thank you for sharing that. Is there a link to that program anywhere, David? Where are you? I lost you. Elliot, I'm sorry. I also forgot your name.
You mean in the diocese? Yeah, but it's been so long since we applied that I'm
Not sure you
might
have
have
it.
trouble finding it.
That's right, Catherine, Neria. We're the Center for Religion, the Center for Deep Green Faith is now sort of tapping into that redirected grant money because it wasn't being used.
Really, Jerry?
Yeah, so we are there and we're paying attention.
Really, Jerry? I mean,
So
that's
right.
fascinating, Jerry. I'm happy to hear about that.
Okay.
Let me get back to answering your other question so I can stop talking and let other people talk. I think it's in terms of what you would do in Kentucky, I strongly would encourage you to do that in terms of creating that network or creating that resolution. So in Plainsong Farm, one of our projects has been helping dioceses map their land. Because I learned when I proposed a resolution that was similar to this in 2018, that the Episcopal Church, despite the fact that we've been on these shores since before there was America, we've never made it a priority to quantify and identify our land holdings. And I thought that church insurance surely had a list of all of our land holdings, and they didn't. And so we ended up getting asked in the last triennium if we would do some pilot work along these lines, and we mapped land for the Diocese of Arkansas, Indianapolis, and Spokane. And when we talked to those three bishops, each one of them said, this would be great. I've never had this before. I thought that it would be something that we should, I thought it was something that we should do, but I don't have the capacity on my staff to do it. And I don't know anybody who can do it. So thank you for taking it on. And at this point, there is enough publicly available land data that we actually partnered with our local watershed agency and bought some time from one of the staff there who uses public data to identify what is Episcopal Church land holdings. And one of the things that we've learned a lot about how hard this is. I'll talk too much if I say anything more about that, but Eastern and the Diocese of Eastern and Western Michigan, as we are currently contemplating merger, are also completing a land mapping project across both of these dioceses. And when we finish one of these projects, we present the diocese with a map that shows their land in ecological context and social context, so that you can see your land holdings in relation to their soils, in relation to their watersheds, in relation to biodiversity conservation initiatives, as well as in relation to like food desert, food capacity, food access, and food security, and the indigenous peoples who were on this, for whom that land was home prior to and throughout European settlement. So yeah, we are now doing our fourth one of these maps, and I think it's really, it's been very interesting. What we've noticed is there hasn't been capacity within a diocese to then take the map and run with it. And we haven't been funded to help a diocese run with this map either. And that's kind of the current, what we're up against, trying to foster some more of this work without quite having capacity. I'll put my hand down and shut up now.
Well, and that we would be similar, right? Okay, it's one thing to ask for it. It's another thing, who's going to do it, right? That's the big question. But if you're let's say if you are a committee of, creation care or whatever, this one seems to be fairly accessible. If you'd have to prioritize it, I think, to do. And Elliot, I would think that land use is more accessible than energy. That grant-wise, I'm wondering in Southern Ohio if they had grants for this, for restoration, preservation, regenerative agriculture, if they would have gotten more applications than for energy. There's no $10,000 way to do energy very well. There are lots of $10,000 ways to work with land. Anyway, just that thought. But anyway, okay. Thank you. Any other comment on this before we?
Well, I do have one as a member of my diocese. We are very rural for the most part. We have some large cities, but the rural landscape is largely corn and soybeans, which means that for the most part, that part of the environment that are the most important in sequestering carbon and producing oxygen have almost entirely disappeared. And that makes this particular resolution very almost critical in our diocese. And it's very, very hard to get people around here to understand that there are better ways to use the land than that corn, soybeans, and vast expanses of green grass.
Yep.
Pam, when you say critical, do you mean like important, or do you mean people feel like someone is criticizing them?
Well, it's a combination of both. I think it's critical in the sense that we really need to concentrate on doing these sorts of things because in the end, it's going to help the farmers. We're having a problem with a stormwater in this in our county. And one of the reasons is the county has done nothing about containing stormwater and appropriately allowing it to trickle back into the aquifer. So we're starting to see a real problem with water availability since although some of us get our water from Lake Michigan, most of the county gets it from groundwater. And we've for years encouraged that groundwater to run off as quickly as possible and end up in Lake Michigan, which also has environmental impacts. But it would be much better for us to be able to concentrate at least on our church property to taking the steps that would allow our property to be more environmentally sustainable. As in my own parish, we have almost 7 acres around the new building, and it's just Kentucky bluegrass that takes a lot of water. They over fertilize. They have to spray it with pesticides to stop the weeds, and that's hardly sensitive to the environment. And when I talk about it, I get a great deal of anger.
Yeah. That's what I mean by entry point. Green grass is probably one of the, if we can learn how to talk about it theologically, talking
Yes.
about green grass is an entry point to this conversation.
Oh, absolutely.
So, but I think the key is you have to learn to talk about it theologically. It can't be socially, and it can't be emotionally, and can't even be politically. It's got to be theologically.
Oh, yeah.
Missionally. Okay. Let's see, we're down to 15 minutes, so maybe we might get 2 more of these done, unless these get more boring than they've been so far. So,
Well, A018, 15 rather. Oh, excuse me, it's 8088. Commit to the pressing work of addressing the global climate change. It's another long one.
yeah, so what are they wanting the church to do? Huh?
Well,
Rejoin the Paris Accord.
yeah.
Oh, paying for people to go to the council parties and go to COP.
Right. Well, it does, in paragraph 5 where it says frontline communities and that tangibly and financially assist those communities with the costs of both climate change and mitigation and policies that prohibit the authorization and construction of new fossil fuel infrastructure and all the rest of that. That's very important, but we have to remember that no way of generating electricity is environmentally neutral. And as an environmentalist, it disturbs me that we are yet again concentrating on only one part of the problem. And that doesn't mean that we shouldn't take these steps. I'm just saying that's just the beginning. That's not how we're going to fix things.
Yeah, and one of my complaints about several of these is that they are hyper focused on climate change.
Exactly.
Which I actually, yeah, I don't even consider that. I mean, it is a huge threat, but I think it's almost secondary to land use.
Well,
we're just
not only that, we concentrate on this and we totally ignore the elephant in the room. And that is that humanity has exceeded the carrying capacity of the earth. And each and every one of us breathes out carbon dioxide 24 hours a day. And we pass methane and other greenhouse gases from our intestinal tracts on a daily basis. And we ourselves are having a not inconsequential impact on what's happening to the atmosphere and the climate today. And I have only read or heard of one climate scientist who even bothered to mention the elephant in the room, and he was booed.
wow. I mean, it would be, and I don't want us to divert on this, so it's a fascinating, I haven't ever thought about it, but all the arguments are if we can fix transportation, heating and cooling, you know, for the most part, that's enough to level off the thing, which means we could continue to pass gas and belch as human animals, and that's not, that the atmosphere can still absorb our doing so. And they talk about cattle being a significant. So does the human population produce more methane than?
We produce more methane than all the cows on this planet.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I agree though that talk about setting the. I mean that's a huge theological, right? You're saying basically it doesn't matter what we do, we can't be human beings. We have to stop having children. Of course, there's a way to do that too, right? You know,
Well,
I mean,
yeah.
educated women have fewer children. That's just a fact. But
Well, one of my professors at Santa Barbara was a charter member of ZPG. That was an organization started in the 60s, if y'all don't remember. It stands for Zero Population Growth.
yeah, which is happening in Western developed countries.
To a certain extent, yeah.
The one below it, though, about encourage all church communities, especially parishes, dioceses, and camps and conference centers, to learn about the pressing moral implications of climate change. So another resolution we are pondering in Kentucky is to we can't mandate, to resolve that each summer's series of camp education formation involves something about ecology. I wouldn't want to make it just about climate change. That's where I push back a little bit at this. But that we could say to the camps, every year the Diocese of Kentucky resolves to include ecological education in every session. We could do that. And we might be able to say, I don't know, where else we might be able to get at something. Anyway, that thought.
Well, like I said, this is one of the most, it's inclusive of a lot of things. And if we followed through without concentrating only on one aspect of the situation, I think it would be very good for us. Because it's a matter of educating people, you know, that there's more than one issue involved here and we need to pay attention to all of them.
Yeah, the last sentence too, liturgical resources and Christian education. Those are actionable. So I don't know.
I mean, they're actionable and they aren't really, I think that the various institutions of the church could do them reasonably, because I am sure there are people all over this country who are members of the Episcopal Church who have training in these areas, and I'm sure that many of them would be more than happy to come and do a little teaching.
Yeah, I'm looking at comments. Summer camp programs, are in decline, which is true. Too much competition, but also maybe not enough relevance. It would be a way of pushing back on that is, rather than throwing up our hands, maybe we need to up our game when it comes to the relevance of a church camp. And so that's one response. Clergy training, of course, getting clergy to these things. What things? To creation care kind of conversations. As long as they're about science and politics, the clergy will not show. And so I think theology, liturgy, prayer, spirituality has some potential for that. And COVID, of course, he has devastating camps all around.
Oh, yeah.
It's already in the decline. Anyway, just pulling out the chat stuff there. We are down to 10 minutes. What do we want to do?
I would like, I already sent a message to Pam that I would like her to put the numbers of the remaining, the remaining resolutions in the chat, so that the ones we haven't gotten to, we can look up for ourselves.
All right.
Actually, putting them all in the chat would be helpful. That way I have them in one location.
Okay, they're
Yeah.
all in the chat. Links to all of them are in the chat. They are also on the Creation Care, the Province 5 Creation Care website. They are listed there with
Which
links
one?
to them.
Which website?
The Province 5 Creation Care Network website,
Oh, okay.
because they were there. If you are in Province 5, they were also in your newsletter that went out. So we listed them all there so that we can see,
Right.
so that you could look them up if you wanted to look them up before you came. Jerry, I didn't warn you about this, but I'd love to sideline the conversation or distract the conversation or focus the conversation. Here, let's focus the conversation.
That's good. Okay.
One of the things that Province 5 is really working on in all of their networks is to help get resources into the hands of the people in their local context, right? The province doesn't exist except to help get the people who are ministering the pieces that they need. And boy, we have just gone through these resolutions, and I wonder if it could be the work of this group or a small group or some conversation that we can take to next time to really put together some pieces that can be shared across our provinces. I'm not sure how it's working in 4 and if this would be interesting to you, but I think that at least for people in Province 5, if we put together a letter that said, "Dear Bishop, during General Convention, there was a resolution A088 that said that you should put together, A087, that says that you should put together a network of landowner, blah, 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 blah," right? We can just quote it. We can say, "Dear Bishop, we'd like you to pay attention to this." Signed, my name, your name, and the Creation Care networks of Province 4 and 5, right? It's that follow-up pieces that is something that people can do so that bishops are hearing from people in the pews, and we can share this in newsletters and we can share this on the website, right? So if this is something you care about, you can send your bishop a note. The other thing I did with the notes is something, some action pieces, right? Like, what can you do for action? So that was the bishops, or how talking about green grass and how we can do something different with the land. The resolutions, right? We can share broadly. Look, this is a thing that was called on for General Convention to look at our camp and conference centers. In Province 5, those are super easy to find, right?
Oh, yes.
Each diocese has one or doesn't, and boom, there, you're pretty, at least with the camp focus, you can do that pretty quickly. So I'm not sure how that feels with the group as a whole, but I wanted to check with you on that.
I think it's a great idea because there's so much information here coming out, and I keep thinking how I can share that with my local parish or whatever, or select ideas, and that would be very helpful.
One thing the Peace and Justice in Kentucky is going to do, we kind of divide. We had like 6 of these, I think. They had actually picked about 8 or 10 because they were more than the environmental ones. But we categorized them into potential for resolution at convention, and everything else was monthly newsletter. So that we would write up one of these per month in a series of, newsletters that get sent out. I mean, that's kind of a version of your thing, Heather. That it's not well, actually, there's a single group of people. It's the Peace and Justice group in the diocese, but a version of the same, just to help people know what's here.
Yeah, because there's so much information. How do you sort through? How do you figure it out? How do you make action?
Tracy says, good idea. Down to 4 minutes. And of course, we say these things and we say they're great ideas. What gets us stuck, of course, is no way to act on it. And so I don't know if any of you who say it's a great idea or like the idea have any way of knowing what next step could be taken, and is that in any of your ball courts to do, is of course one of those questions, right?
Right.
I wish, this is also the sort of thing that if there were such a person at 815, the Episcopal Church, who would write those summaries up and make it available for them to be replicated in whatever context, would be helpful stuff too. Because really, if this were done once, it would be useful for everybody, right? You could,
Right.
it's
Have you thought about reaching out to Phoebe Chatfield?
not until this moment.
I mean, there is Phoebe Chatfield.
There is Phoebe Chatfield.
Jerry, could you stop sharing so we can see everybody?
I will. We're there. Thank you.
May I just add something that I just heard from yesterday from a parishioner who was trying to talk a friend into going to the Creation Care blog that I write. And this friend said, "Oh, I don't believe in creationism." I think that's and then this person who talked to me yesterday said, "I think you need to explain what creation care is every time you talk about it." Boy, that's going to get kind of boring after a while. I just wondering whether that label is not effective or even is off-putting.
Yeah, I agree that there's not a good name yet.
No.
Creation Care is maybe the best of the worst. So I agree it's different, but I haven't come up with one. If anybody's got a better way to label this.
Well, I did notice that in applying for the grant, that the grant is for the care of creation, not for creation care. And I think that calling it care of creation would be less likely to get the "I don't believe in creationism" thing.
I think anybody who says they don't believe in creationism is just looking for a way out.
Yes.
That's a red herring.
Well,
Yeah.
if you insist on reading only the King James version of the Bible and take it quite literally, it says have dominion over God's creation. And people don't understand that that's not what they think it means.
And things like that. There's all
Yes.
That's
power.
not what that means.
That's not what creation means.
Anyways, okay, we are at the hour. So, was there something else? There was the question about how you would start something like this. If you don't have a committee or task force in a diocese, the one thing I say about that when that question gets asked is, if you bring the energy and the people and the work that's already done to a diocese or a bishop, there's a fair chance that you're going to get a positive response. What you don't get a good response is bringing a problem, a hole, a vacancy, an absence to a diocese or a bishop. So the way to get something like that started is to build it first.
Right.
And anyway, just that. Don't go to a bishop saying, we sure wish you would do something. That's exactly how you do not get something done.
Don't have it already put together and say, hey, we've got this great
We've
group
got it
who
all.
wants-"
All you got to do is sign off and give us a little publicity. Everything's already built.
Our problem, in a sense, and again, let me drop the word problem, is that we used to have one, and we don't any longer. So it's partly for me. I want to figure out what actually happened.
Yeah. One more thing that might help is if it failed before because it was sort of the spent too much time wagging a green finger at everybody and telling them they're all bad and wrong. That's a good way to kill such a ministry. You may want to reframe what it is you're trying to do and make sure it is in clear connection to a diocesan mission and purpose and Christian goals.
Thank you.
Yeah, so those are both a couple things that'll kill the ministry.
Oh, yeah.
So, okay, everyone. Heather, anything else?
This was great. Thank you, everyone. Do you have a closing prayer before I stop recording?
I never have done that, but I can send it off. Pam, thank you. Anything else you?
No, that's pretty much it. You can read the resolutions. They're fairly straightforward. I have a feeling, though, that it's going to be difficult to follow through on some of them, but that's, depends on on the attitudes of the people in your diocese.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of energy and awareness brought here from absolute zero to, there was quite a bit here. So I think that's quite successful. So the Lord bless you and keep you and go out into all creation, blessing every living thing you encounter in the name of Christ. Amen.
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 See you all.